the improve the audio quality. Yeah, hopefully we get to the meat, the real meat of the story now. I have some hot chocolate, and we're in the Cloud House Cafe as usual. And you can watch all the previous chapters of Moby Dick on my YouTube. Well, it's the easiest place to find it, I guess. So, welcome. Feel free to send me some awards if you like listening to that. The heart, spin ones, whatever you want to send. Lovely. Help me with my next book. And my hot chocolate. Right, chapter 101, A Bower in the Arsac. That's painful. Hitherto, for indescriptively treating with the sperm whale, I have chiefly dwelt upon the marvels of its outer aspect, or separately and in detail upon some few interior structural features. But to a large and thorough sweeping comprehension of him, it behoves me now to unbutton him still further and untagging the points of his hose, unbuckling his garters, and casting loose the hooks and the eyes of the joints in his innermost bones. Setting before you in his ultimatum, that is to say, in his unconditional skeleton. But how now, Ishmael? How is it that you, a mere oarsman in the fishery, pretend to know aught about the subterranean parts of the whale? Did erudite Stubb, mounted upon your capstan, deliver lectures on the anatomy of the cetacea, and by help of the windlass hold up a specimen rib for exhibition? Explain thyself, Ishmael. Can you land a full-grown whale on your deck for examination as a cook dishes a roast pig? Surely not. Good morning, Tim. How are you? A veritable witness have you. Always a pleasure to have you here, by the way. A veritable witness you have hitherto been, Ishmael, but have a care how you seize the privilege of Jonah alone, the privilege of discoursing upon the joists and beams, the rafters, ridgepole, sleepers, and underpinnings, making up the framework of Leviathan, and the like of the towel vats, dairy rooms, butteries, and cheeseries in his bowels. I confess that since Jonah, few whalemen have penetrated very far beneath the skin of the adult whale. Nevertheless, I have been blessed with an opportunity to dissect him in miniature. In a ship, I belonged to a small cub sperm whale, was once bodily hoisted to the deck for his poke or bag, to make sheaths for the barbs of the harpoons, and for the heads of the lances. Think you I let that chap go without using my boat hatchet and jackknife, and breaking the seal and reading all the contents of that young cub? And as for my exact knowledge of the bones of the Leviathan in their gigantic full-grown development, for that rare knowledge I am indebted to my late royal friend Tranquo, king of the Tranqui, one of the Arsacides, I think. For being at Tranqui years ago, when attached to the trading ship Day of Algiers, I was invited to spend part of the Arsacadian holidays with the Lord of Tranqui, or Tronk, perhaps. Thank you. Lovely. Appreciate it. I was invited to spend at his retired palm villa at Pupella, a sea-grown glen not very far distant from what our sailors call Bamboo Town, his capital. Sip of coffee. Some hot chocolate here, Tiffany. Come here to the Cloud House Cafe and have some hot chocolate. What do you reckon? Okay. Among many other fine qualities, my royal friend Tranquil, being gifted with a devout love for all manners of barbaric virtue, had brought together in Pupella whatever rare things the most ingenious of his people could invent. Chiefly carved woods or wondrous devices, chiseled shells, inlaid spears, costly paddles, aromatic canoes, and all that was distributed among whatever natural wonders the wonder-freighted tribute-rendering waves had cast upon his shores. Chief among these latter was a great sperm whale, which, after an unusually long raging gale, had been found dead, stranded, with his head against a cocoa nut tree. Cocoa nut. Mm-hmm. walnut tree, whose plumage, like tufted droopings, seemed his verdant jet. When the vast body had at last been stripped of its fathom-deep enfoldings, and the bones became dry dust in the sun, then the skeleton was carefully transported up the Pupella Glen, where a great temple of lordly palms now sheltered it. The ribs were hung like trophies. The vertebrae were carved with Arsacadian annals in strange hieroglyphics. In the skull, the priests kept up an unextinguished aromatic flame, so that the mystic head again sent forth its vapory spout. While suspended from a bough, the terrific lower jaw vibrated over all the devotees, like the hair-hung sword that so affrighted Damocles. It was a wondrous sight. The wood was green as mosses of the icy glen. The trees stood high and haughty, feeling their living sap. The industrious earth beneath was as a weaver's loom, with a gorgeous carpet on it, whereof the ground vine tendrils formed the warp and woof, and the living flowers the figures. All the trees, with all their laden branches, all the shrubs and ferns and grasses, the message-carrying air, all these unceasingly were active. Through the lacings of the leaves, the great sun seemed a flying shuttle weaving the unwearied verdure. O busy weaver, unseen weaver, pause. One word, whither flows the fabric? What palace may it deck? Wherefore all those ceaseless toilings? Speak, weaver, stay thy hand. But one single word with thee, nay, the shuttle flies, the figures float from forth the loom, the fresh and rushing carpet forever slides away. The weaver god, he weaves, and by that weaving is he deafened, that he hears no mortal voice, and by that humming, we too, who look on the loom, are deafened. And only when we escape it shall we hear the thousand voices that speak through it. For even so as it is in all material factions, the spoken words that are inaudible among the flying spindles, the same words are plainly heard without the walls, bursting from the opened casements. Thereby have villainies been detected. Ah, mortal, then be heedful, for so, in all this din of the world's greatest loom, thy subtlest thinkings may be overheard afar. Now, amid the green, life restless loom of that Arsacadian wood, the great white worship skeleton lay lounging, a gigantic idler. Yet, as the ever-woven verdant warp and woof intermixed and hummed around him, the mighty idler seemed the cunning weaver, himself all woven over with vines, every month assuming greener, fresher verdure, but himself a skeleton. Life folded death, death trellised life. The grim god wived with youthful life and begat him curly-headed glories. Okay, yeah, Twitch or Twitter. Give it a try. Don't love the language of this, though. It is like a poem. The way this is written, I think it's beautiful. Now, when with Royal Tranquil, I visited this wondrous whale and saw the skull on an altar, and the artificial smoke ascending from where the real jet had issued, I marvelled that the king should regard a chapel as an object of virtue. He laughed. But more I marvel that the priests should swear that the smoky jet of his was genuine. To and fro I paced before the skeleton, brushed the vines aside, broke through the ribs, and with a ball of Arsacadian twine wandered, eddied long amid its many winding, shaded colonnades and arbors. But soon my line was out, and followed it back. I emerged from there. I emerged from the opening where I entered. I saw no living thing within. Naught was there but bones. Like a real thing. Fit for anything. Cutting me a green measuring rod, I once more dived within the skeleton. From their arrow slit in the skull, the priests perceived me, taking the altitude of the final rib. Now, now, they shouted. Darst thou measure this, our God? That's for us. Aye, priests, well, how long do you make it then? But hereupon a fierce contest rose among them concerning feet and inches. They cracked each other's sconces with their yardsticks, and the great skull echoed, and seizing that lucky chance, I quickly concluded my own measurements. Good word, at measurements. These measurements I now propose to set before you, but first be recorded that in this manner I am not free to utter any fancied measurement I please, because there are skeleton authorities you can refer to test my accuracy. There is a Leviathanic museum, they tell me, in Hull, England, one of the whaling ports of that country, where they have some fine specimens of finbacks and other whales. Likewise, I have heard that in the Museum of Manchester in New Hampshire, they have what the proprietors call the only perfect skeleton of a Greenland or river whale in the United States. Moreover, at a place in Yorkshire called Burton Constable by name, a certain Sir Clifford Constable has in his possession the skeleton of a sperm whale, but of moderate size, by no means of the full-grown magnitude of my friend King Tanquil's. In both cases, the stranded whales to which these two skeletons belonged were originally claimed by their proprietors upon similar grounds. King Tanquil seizing his because he wanted it, and Sir Clifford because he was lord of the seigneuries of those parts. Sir Clifford's whale has been articulated throughout, so that like a great chest of drawers you can open him and shut him, and all his bony cavities spread out his ribs like a gigantic fan, and swing all day upon his lower jaw. Locks are to be put upon some of his trapdoors and shutters, and the footman will show round future visitors with a bunch of keys at his side. Sir Clifford thinks of charging twopence for a peep at the Whispering Gallery in his spinal column, threepence to hear the echo in the hollow of his cerebellum, and sixpence for the unrivalled view from his forehead. The skeleton dimensions I shall now proceed to set down are copied verbatim on my right arm, where I had them tattooed in my wild wanderings at that period. There was no other secure way of preserving such valuable statistics. But I was crowded for space and wished the other parts of my body to remain a blank page for a poem I was then composing. At least what untattooed parts might remain, I did not trouble myself with the odd inches, nor indeed should inches at all enter into a congenial measurement of the whale. Would a man tattooing the dimensions of a whale upon his arm? Barely can imagine what parts are left blank. Right, another chapter, I think. That one's another chapter. Yes. Chapter 103, Measurement of the Whale's Skeleton. In the first place, I wish to lay before you a particular plain statement touching the living bulk of this Leviathan, whose skeleton we are briefly to exhibit. Such a statement may prove useful to you. According to a careful calculation I have made, and which I partly base upon Captain Scoresby's estimate of 70 tons for the largest sized Greenland whale of 60 feet in length, according to my careful calculation, I say a sperm whale of the largest magnitude between 85 and 90 feet in length, and something less than 45 in its fullest circumference. Such a whale will weigh at least 90 tons, so that reckoning 13 men to a ton, he would considerably outweigh the combined population of a whole village of 1,100 inhabitants. Think you that brains like yoked cattle should be put into this Leviathan to make him at all budge to any landsman's imagination? Having already in various ways put before you his skull, spout hole, jaw, teeth, tail, forehead, fins, and divers other parts, I shall now simply point out what is most interesting in the general bulk of his obstructed bones. But as the colossal skull embraces so very large a proportion of the entire extent of his skeleton, as it is by far the most complicated part, and as nothing is to be repeated concerning it in this chapter, you must not fail to carry it in your mind or under your arm as we proceed, otherwise you will not gain a complete notion of the general structure we are about to view. In length, the sperm whale skeleton at Tranquil, I don't know, measured 72 feet, so that when fully invested and extended in life, he must have been 90 feet long, for in the whale the skeleton loses about one-fifth in length compared with the living body. Of this 72 feet, his skull and jaw comprised some 20 feet, leaving some 50 feet of plain backbone. Attached to this backbone for something less than a third its length, third its length was the mighty circular basket of ribs which once enclosed his vitals. To me, this vast ivory-ribbed chest with the long chest in what sense? Is that a double meaning there? Chest, or chest as in case, I wonder. Yeah, maybe a metaphor. With the long, unrelieved spine extended far away from it in a straight line, not a little resembled the hull of a great ship, new laid upon the stocks, when only some 20 of her naked bow ribs are inserted, and the keel is otherwise for the time but a long disconnected timber. The ribs were 10 on a side. The first, to begin from the neck, was nearly 6 feet long. The second, third, and fourth were each successively longer, till he came to the climax of the fifth, or one for the middle ribs, which measured 8 feet and some inches. From that part, the remaining ribs diminished, till the 10th and last only spanned 5 feet and some inches. In general thickness, they all bore seemingly corresponded to their length. The middle ribs were the most arched. In some of the arsacides, they are used for beams whereupon to lay footpath bridges over small streams. In considering these ribs, I could not but be struck anew with the circumstance, so variously repeated in this book, that the skeleton of the whale was by no means the mould of his invested form. The largest of the tranqui ribs, one of the middle ones, occupied that part of the fish which in life is greatest in depth. Now, the greatest depth of the invested body of this particular whale must have been at least 16 feet, whereas the corresponding rib measured but little more than 8 feet, so that this rib only conveyed half of the true notion of the living magnitude of that part. Besides, for some way, where I now saw but a naked spine, all that had been once wrapped round with tons of added bulk in flesh, muscle, blood, and bones. Still more for the ample fins. I here saw but a few disordered joints, and in place of the weighty and majestic but boneless foot, an utter blank. How vain and foolish then, thought I, for timid, untravelled man to try to comprehend aright this wondrous tale, when, by merely poring over his dead, attenuated skeleton stretched on this piece of wood, no, only in the heart of quickest perils, only when within the eddyings of his angry flukes, only on the profound, unbounded sea can be fully invested whale, the fully invested whale be truly and livingly found out. But the spine, for that, the best way we can consider it is with a crane, the pilot's bones high on end. No speedy enterprise, but now it's done, it looks much like Pompey's pillar. There are 40 and odd vertebrae in all, which in the skeleton are not locked together. They mostly lie like the great nobbled blocks on a Gothic spire, forming solid courses of heavy masonry. The largest, a middle one, is in width something less than 3 feet, and in depth more than 4. The smallest, where the spine tapers away to the tail, is only 2 inches in width, and looks something like a white billiard ball. I was told that there were still smaller ones, but they had been lost by some cannibal urchins, the priest's children, who had stolen them to play marbles with. Thus, we see how the spine of even the hugest of living things tapers off at last into simple child's play. Thanks for subscribing to the app. Should I have one more chapter? 3 pages? Yeah, one more chapter. Thanks for subscribing. Chapter 104, The Fossil Whale. From the mighty bulk, the whale forms a most congenial theme, whereon to enlarge, amplify, and generally expatiate. With you could not compress him. By good rights, he should only be treated of an imperial fool, not to tell over again his furlongs from spherical to tail, and the yards he measures about the waist. Only think of the gigantic involutions of his intestines, where they lie in him like great cables and hawsers coiled away in the subterranean orlop depths of a line of battleship. Since I have undertaken to manhandle then it behoves me to prove myself omnisciently exhausted with this exercise, not overlooking the minutest seminal germs of his blood, and spinning him out to the uttermost coils of his bowels. Having already described him in most of his present habituary and anatomical peculiarities, it now remains to magnify him in archaeological, fossiliferous, and antediluvian point of view. Applied to any other creature than the Leviathan, to an ant or a flea, such poetry terms might just be deemed unwarrantably grandiloquent. But when the Leviathan is in text, the case is altered. Fain am I to stagger to this emprise under the weightiest words of the dictionary. And here be it said that whenever it has been convenient to consult one in the course of these dissertations, I have invariably used a huge quarto edition of Johnson, expressly purchased for that purpose, because the famous lexicographer's uncommon personal book more than fitted him to compile a lexicon to be used by a whale author like me. Wow! The whale is so enormous, I have to use a dictionary composed by an enormous fat man. Brilliant. One often hears of writers that rise well with their subject, though it may seem but an ordinary one. How then with me writing of this Leviathan? Unconsciously, my chirography expands into placard capitals. Give me a condor's quill. Give me Vesuvius's crater for an inkstand. Friends, hold my arms, for in the mere act of penning my thoughts of this Leviathan, they weary me and make me faint with their outreaching comprehensiveness of sweep, as if to include the whole circle of the sciences and all the generations of whales and men and mastodons, past and present and to come, with all the revolving panoramas of empire on earth and throughout the whole universe, not excluding its suburbs. Such and so magnifying is the virtue of a large and liberal theme, we expand to its bulk. To produce a mighty book, you must choose a mighty theme. No great and enduring volume can ever be written on the flea, though many there be who have tried it. Ere entering upon the subject of fossil whales, I present my credentials as a geologist, by stating that in my miscellaneous time I have been a stonemason and also a great digger of ditches, canals and walls, wine vaults, cellars and cisterns of all sorts. Likewise, by way of preliminary, I desire to remind the reader that while in the earlier geological strata there are found the fossils of monsters now almost completely extinct, the subsequent relics discovered in what are called the tertiary formations seem the connecting, or at any rate intersected, between the antichronical creatures and those whose remote posterity are said to have erected the ark. All the fossil whales hitherto discovered belong to the tertiary period, which is the last preceding the superficial formations. And though none of them precisely answer to any known species of the present time, they are yet sufficiently akin to them in general respects to justify their taking rank as cetacean fossils. Detached broken fossils of pre-Adamite whales, fragments of their bones and skeletons, have within 30 years past at various intervals been formed in the base of the Alps. Found in the base of the Alps, in Lombardy, in France, in England, in Scotland, in the state of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. Among the more curious of such remains is part of a skull, which in the year 1779 was disinterred in the Rue Dauphine in Paris, a short street opening almost directly upon the Palace of the Tuileries, and bones disinterred in excavating the great docks of Antwerp in Napoleon's time. Cuvier pronounced these fragments to have belonged to some utterly unknown Leviathanic species. It's interesting. Those of you who watch Claire in Paris, who is In my last broadcast at the start, she often shows the Tuileries, and I think the Rideau Fenêtre. There was a mighty whale there. Decent turtle. Interesting. I have to tell her that. But by far the most wonderful of all cetacean relics was the almost complete vast skeleton of an extinct monster found in the year 1842 on the plantation of Judge Cray in Alabama. The awe-stricken, credulous slaves in the vicinity took for it the bones of one of the fallen angels. The Alabama doctors declared it a huge reptile and bestowed upon it the name of Basilosaurus. But some specimen bones were being taken across to Owen, the English anatomist. It turned out that this alleged reptile was a whale, though of a departed species. A significant illustration of the fact, again and again repeated in this book, that the skeleton of the whale furnishes but little clue to the shape of his fully invested body. So Owen rechristened the monster Zoigludon, and in his paper read before the London Geographical Society, pronounced it in absence of one of the most extraordinary creatures which the mutations of the globe have blotted out of existence. When I stand among these mighty leviathan skeletons, skulls, tusks, jaws, ribs, and vertebrae, all characterized by partial resemblance to the existing deep-sea monsters, but at the same time bearing on the other hand similar affinities to the annihilated antichronical leviathans, their incalculable seniors, I am by a flood borne back that wondrous period ere time itself can be said to have begun, for time began with man. Here Saturn's grey chaos rolls over me, and I obtain dim, shuddering glimpses into those polar eternities, when wedged bastions of ice pressed hard upon what are now the tropics. And in all the 25,000 miles of this world's circumference, not an inhabitable hand's breadth of land is visible. Then the whole world was the whales, and king of king of creation, he left his wake along the present lines of the Andes and the Himalayas. Who can show a pedigree like Leviathan? Ahab's harpoon had shed older blood than the Pharaoh's Methuselah seems a schoolboy. I look round to shake hands with Shem. I am horror-struck at this anti-Mosaic, unsourced existence of the unspeakable terrors of the whale, which having been before all time, must needs exist after all humane ages are over. But not alone has this Leviathan left his pre-Adamite traces in the stereotyped plates of nature, and in limestone and marl bequeathed his ancient bust. But Egyptian tablets whose antiquity seem to claim for them an almost fossiliferous character, we find the unmistakable print of his fin. In an apartment of the great temple of Dendera some 50 years ago, there was discovered upon the granite ceiling a sculptured and painted planisphere abounding in centaurs, griffins, and dolphins, similar to the grotesque figures on the celestial globe of the moderns. Gliding among them, old Leviathan swam as of yore, was there swimming in that planisphere centuries before Solomon was cradled. Nor must there be omitted another strange attestation of the antiquity of the whale in his old osseous post-diluvian reality, as set down by the venerable John Neal, the old Barbary traveller. Not far from the seaside they have a temple, the rafters and beams of which are made of whale bones, for whales of a monstrous size are often cast up dead upon the shore. The common people imagine that by a secret power bestowed by God upon the temple, no whale can pass it without immediate death. But the truth of the matter is that on either side of the temple there are rocks that shoot 2 miles into the sea and wound the whales when they light upon them. They keep a whale's rib of an incredible length for a miracle, while laying upon the ground with its convex part uppermost makes an arch, the head of which cannot be reached by a man upon a camel's back. This rib, says John Hill, is said to have lain there 100 years before I saw it. The historians affirm that a prophet who prophesied of Mohammed, Mahomet, Mohammed came from this temple, and some do not stand to assert that the prophet Jonas was cast forth by the whale at the base of this temple. In this Afric temple of the whale, I leave you, reader, and if you be an Nantucketer and a whaleman, you will silently worship there. Yes, that'll be for today. Finish on chapter 104. So we've got chapter 105. Does the whale's magnitude diminish? Will he perish? Sounds good. And then the next one after that is Ahab's leg. I do love some of that. I like to know. Beautiful words. It is like cool. So there we go. That's only that left. So we're on page 378 of 470 or so. So less than half a page to go. Not too long. I don't know if I'm going to finish this year though. Not finished yet. I will be in 5 minutes though. Okay. Right. Thank you for watching. Everybody, thank you for staying with me and reading Moby Dick. And I will see you next week for the next few chapters, or I'll see you tonight maybe for the phone box quiz. I'll be doing something this weekend, stuff generally. So I'll see you next time. Don't forget to send me awards, the little hearts. You can send those whenever you like. If you're on apps, you can use my Buy Me a Coffee. buymeacoffee.com/A9630 if you want to do that, if you feel like it. And I'll see you next week for more Dick. So thanks for watching. Cheers, bye everyone. Have a nice Thursday. Whatever it is when you are.